Hi everyone, I'm Greg from Pilot Institute. We train drone pilots all over the country.
Hi, my name is Haye from PiXL, where we cover all the drone news on our website.
Welcome to the latest episode of the PiXL Drone Show, our weekly podcast where we talk to industry professionals about what they do in the UAS space.
From professionals who use drone to fly inspection missions to public safety users or even drone light shows, you will learn on the PiXL Drone Show that drones are much more than just toys.
And welcome to another PiXL Drone Show episode here. And today we are joined by Josh Ogden, who's the CEO of AVSS, a company based in Canada that manufactures parachutes. And they have some cool information about flying over people, which I know is a topic that is very popular here in the United States. So Haye and I are going to be asking some tough questions to Josh about what has been going on at AVSS. But Josh, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me today, guys.
Tell us a little bit more about AVSS and what kind of service you guys provide in the industry.
Yeah, for sure. So AVSS, Canadian company, offices in Ontario, New Brunswick, also investors from the state of New York and a presence there, upstate specifically. So we started in 2017. We primarily build regulatory compliant parachute recovery systems. Lots of asterisks between regulatory compliant because sometimes there's still hobby DIY parachutes out there that really don't meet the standards and requirements, and that's our main business. We also do work on some guided delivery systems, simply discussing it from like a Call of Duty airdrop. So what we really specialize in is dropping things from the sky, whether it's unguided, guided. We're really good at dropping things out of the sky and making sure it's a reliable, safe, accurate landing.
Can you tell us a little bit how you got started in this industry and with this product? Like, what is the background of AVSS?
So AVSS, my business partners and I spent a couple of years actually looking at ideas. Before this, I actually worked in renewable energy, bidding on wind farms, and my colleagues worked in different fields in tech. I used to actually own a used golf ball company, so I've been an entrepreneur for the last decade. And in 2016, early 2017, we saw the Domino's commercial, the pizza delivery, and we're not the optimist, I guess. We were more pessimistic, being like, wait, what happens when this fails? Is this pizza just going to end up on my windshield, and am I going to get hit by a drone and, on my tombstone, death by drone? Like we were very pessimistic about these ideas, and we started saying, well, why doesn't it have like a backup device? And then started looking and very much started reading regulations. Like we spent 2 years actually looking at about a dozen ideas. We want to be entrepreneurs. We want to create a new business. But we didn't know what. We were looking at different problems. And when we started, France and Chile had rules related to parachutes, but nobody really else did. But our big bet was like, we're not going to have ubiquitous drone delivery, commercial drones flying around without these backup devices. And at that time, it was just hobby level solutions. They were missing so many components like an automatic triggering system, a flight termination system, logging, and just the compliance piece. So we spoke to some people in the industry. We spoke with some researchers from our National Research Council. The funny thing is the people who were tech people but not drone people were like, that's stupid. It's easy. That's done. Parachutes have been around for decades. Whatever. That's easy. But then once you talk to people who've been in the industry, they'd be like, no, this is still a problem. These systems still suck. They don't work. They're not reliable. It's a nice to have other than these countries. And we basically gave ourselves 12 months and said, okay, we're going to go at it. Had some money from a previous company and said, okay, let's bet on this. And then we slowly started building. And for the first 3 years of business, we dabbled in some of these random projects, but realized, no, let's just build a core product. Let's build the core deployment piece, the core automatic triggering system, the core pieces before we start pushing it out. And then we brought the first product to market on the M200 in 2020 during COVID. Tough time there, and we chose, we've done the ASTM compliance. And then our big thing with our business is we want regulatory compliant products. We're not going to go look for those quick sales to just make a buck. We also don't like selling to customers that want to save their asset. The parachute's purpose is to get compliance, to fly your mission, to unlock an operation. It's not to save your drone, because the reality is like, the parachute can save. And, when we do testing, we see 40% of the time, no damage. Well, that means 60% of the time there's still damage. And, 1 out of 45 tests, you're going to get a bad luck. The drone's going to land funny. It's going to land on concrete. It's going to get dragged across the field. And so that's where we kind of focus what we build on, those compliant pieces, robust and meeting the market need for enabling. We're enabling technology, not a asset saving technology. I don't want to save your asset. I want to let you do more.
So in recent years, we've seen some other competing parachute companies. I think not all of those succeeded. Like, how are you guys different from the competition, and what makes you more successful?
Tighter budgets and more focus on the long-term vision. I think, some of the parachute companies prematurely scaled. When we went to our first trade show in 2017, a couple companies, massive booths, 15 people at the show, trying to drive the message, save your drone. And they just overspent money. And I think that's where we were disciplined in, like, we grow with the market. We're a component manufacturer. We sell to drone manufacturers as well as retrofit products for like DJI, and we grow as the drone industry grows. And I think that discipline helped. We also do generate revenue from another stream through our guided delivery, which is more of an emergency management and military product where we don't really advertise what we're doing, but there's other revenue streams coming in to support the business. We've been profitable for 2 years, and that type of discipline and how we've grown. And yeah, we've raised some money, but we're still the majority shareholders of our business, our 3 business partners, and we're just not burning, Silicon Valley money or public share money. We're taking that steps and building a sustainable long-term business.
Wow, that's refreshing to hear. Actually, a lot of companies out there don't do that. Your platform, your parachutes. I'm sorry. Which platform are they for, or is it more like something generic that you can install on anything?
So. Neither. So what makes us different is we do a lot of custom work. So a lot of you have companies that go and have this generic system, and then they say, "Oh, here's my tube. Go slap it on. Do all the work yourself." When we work with drone manufacturers, we're working more with the bigger ones. We work with Skydio, DJI, AV. We work with some other manufacturers that I can't discuss today, but basically we do a lot of customization. We have these core subcomponents of our product, the deployment system, the bracket designs, and we basically are customizing small amounts to each drone. And then there's sometimes people need a brand new custom product, and we'll build that as well. So when we work with drone manufacturers, we work with anything from 1 kg. We've done up to 80 kilograms. We're starting to get more and more calls for up to 150 kg now. That's because in Canada, April 1st, 2025, we introduced new rules for medium drones for up to 150 kg, as well as beyond visual line of sight. So the Canadian market has allowed us to kind of stay a couple steps ahead of what's coming in the other countries.
So you're talking big drones. Now, in terms of your parachute system to work with the drone, like what kind of information do you need from the drone to communicate and in order for your system to work properly?
Yeah, so we design all our systems ground up for the ASTM F3322 compliance. That's kind of like the gold parachute standard. I actually ended up taking over the technical lead of that last summer. So I'm very involved with those regulatory pieces. And so you have some basically core ingredients. You need to have a flight termination system. You need to have an independent auto triggering system unless you meet like a DO 178 aviation standard, which none of the parachute companies really do. And then you need to have a ballistic ejection system. Some people hear ballistic and they get no idea what it really means, but ballistic means some energy. So spring, CO2, pyrotechnic. And then you need to have certain elements, like you need to have a safety factor built in. So one of the tests we do, and we don't really love, but it's part of the game, is called shock load testing. So you go throw a drone up in the sky, you let it free fall for 3 seconds, and then you deploy your parachute to demonstrate that all that robustness, the shock load isn't ripping the parachute from the drone, your winch isn't falling off, your winch line, the package is staying together. So those are the kind of the key subcomponents. And again, we're following standards, and it's an interesting one from my perspective, because when we entered the market, we weren't at the table creating these standards. A year later, the first standard came out, and we were like, okay, this is what we need to build. Let's do it. Where there's still companies fighting, kicking and screaming. Even drone manufacturers are like, I don't want to crash my drone 45 times. I want to do 2 tests. And it's like, again, those aren't the customers in our view that are going to scale in the long run. There's a certain, like, the industry needs to grow up, and part of that is figuring out how to incur the cost to have a compliant drone and with a parachute. Now, you don't have to sell a drone that flies over people. Like if you have the Helios, you don't need to fly over people. You're confined space. or if you're flying agriculture, you're flying over fields. So for the companies though that want to be serious in the DFR space, in the drone delivery space, like this is just part of the game.
So if you say, okay, we need to test and have the drone free fall for 3 seconds, and I guess depending on exactly what's malfunctioning with the drone, that drone might be tumbling through the air. Upside might not be facing upwards. Like how does the parachute system work in a way that you still make sure that it comes down in a safe manner?
Yeah. So the ejection speed, there's like fundamental, like we have one competitor that really likes to advertise how light their system is, but it's like shooting blanks where it shoots out at like 3 or 4 meters per second. Our systems are ejecting the parachute 8 to 20 meters per second. So these things are deploying fast because you need to get out of that tumble. You need to, when that drone's tumbling, it's kind of like, I've got an M3DT. When it's tumbling, you have kind of a bubble around you. So you need to get out far enough to avoid that. And those are the key pieces. Again, we spent so much time, like we just have at our office, we've built testing infrastructure. For example, I got a big net. They were on Rev 3, big walls. It's probably 15 by 15. I can drop big drones into it and things don't break, so we can tune our algorithms, as well as we have like ground stations where we can sit there and just deploy parachute after parachute, getting the high-speed camera, getting the video data on showing that ejection speed, because there's some pieces that we're looking at that we know what a proper parachute deployment looks like on the ground that makes it capable of overcoming the tumbling. And it's funny you ask about those questions, because I've seen reports from some of our competitors that have like tried to cheat those tests. They play with the CG, like weights on the bottom so the drone doesn't tumble, even though the standard says you're not allowed to do that. So again, we focus on like, your core principles of what do you need to do to make this parachute work. It needs to shoot out fast. It needs to not have false positives, and it needs to reach this kinetic energy threshold per country.
Sorry. It's my turn.
Well, I can keep going. I can keep going.
No. As you're talking, I'm just thinking like how cool it would be to visit your facility and see all the testing that's going on.
You know what? You're welcome to come up. Billy Kyle's been there numerous times. He's participated in our testing, whether it's net testing, field testing. Like if you go on my LinkedIn page, there's actually a lot of good content on like the raw testing unedited, because we're running testing programs all the time. It's just you're deploying, because one thing with the parachute industry is the drone's allowed to fail, one out of 100 flights or 100 hours or something. We're not. Like I got to sit on a drone for 3 years and I have to be like, you're almost like strapped in, like, okay, when am I going? Wait, no, that's not time. And this is where we have to run these ongoing testing, long-term storage programs. Like one thing we do is customers will send us parachutes for repacking, because per the ASTM standard, the end user's not supposed to repack the parachute. Now, you are allowed to train people to repack. I have one competitor that has like a YouTube video, and apparently that's sufficient. And like, I don't want that liability legitimate hanging over my head. And so we do run long-term testing programs where parachute comes for repack. We actually store it for longer. And then we go do ongoing testing to validate extended periods. So just in December, we extended our parachute repacking for the M300 from 12 months to 18 months, because we were deploying parachutes that were packed for 24 months, always adding some safety factor to make sure that, there's no surprises. But if you guys want to come up and crash some drones, I've got a lot. Let's do it.
Oh, we do that on a regular basis here. So yeah, crashing drones is perfect. You mentioned the regulation and the differences. What's the difference between Canada at the moment and the way that they require parachutes, and the US, which really at this stage does not require parachutes anymore, since we got the change in regulation with OOP, at least for just regular Part 107. So can you touch on that?
Yeah, so the parachute is your backup device. So like in Canada, we have rules that a single source of failure cannot create a severe injury. And to come to that conclusion, you got to read, 50 pages and be like, what about this AIS, abbreviated injury scale level 3? What about this laceration, the audible warning, extra workload? And there's all this nuance. But Canada has a self-declaration system, which really opened up the market. One thing that's really intriguing was happened over the last few months. You probably saw that like Autel got removed from this list. And there's been some talks online, and like Autel was a case in my view of just like administrative issue. There's only one email address, and maybe that person who was responsible is no longer there. But we actually caught a bunch of false declarations and incorrect information like fly flyer. People love that parachute from Mavic because it's $300 and they think they're golden. But like they got removed, and we were audited last September. And when we were audited, I was like, wait, who else is getting audited? So I did a FOIA. I FOIA'd them, found out who else, and I saw people just completely ignoring Transport Canada. Some people just like by mistake declaring. Some of them were honest by mistakes, I think. And ultimately in Canada, we have the self-declaration list. We've got like 600 drones on there. 200 are declared for over people, which a lot of them aren't supposed to be there. It's just complete false. And some of it's ignorant. Some of it's just people playing fast and loose with our rules. Difference from my side is I'm Canadian. They can bring me to court. They're probably not going to extradite one of my competitors in a foreign country, but like I have to protect what's right. And that's where we have a self-declaration. Basically, we have controlled airspace near people, over people within 5 meters horizontally of people. And basically in that market, you'll notice like if you went on the Transport Canada choosing the right drone list, there's all these drones. You look at like the M300 or the M350 from DJI, you'll see that DJI declares controlled airspace near people, and then AVSS declares over people. So we have this system where we're classified as a modifier. You can be a manufacturer modifier. In the US, you guys have a declaration list where the applicant, which can be a manufacturer or modifier, but they're just called the applicant, can submit what we call a means compliance. And so there's a lot more work in the US to get this approval. Like April 2021, the ops over people rule actually came out for the US, but there was no means of compliance. Therefore, there's no declaration of compliance. Therefore, there's no drones really available unless you go through that waiver system, or you're going through category 4 or 44807 kind of drone delivery kind of world. Yeah, so in the US, you have the need to do a means of compliance. So means of compliance is the FAA saying, how are you going to test? And is your testing meeting our requirements? So for our means of compliance, we need to do ASTM F3322, which is parachute testing. So go deploy 45 times. Usually we need 6 drones. Not all are going to get broken. We have spare parts. We're pretty proficient at it. We can get it done in about 3 days if the weather's right. And then we have to, once we do that testing, we then take that data. There's some key metrics there. And then we do ASTM F3389, which is the severity of injury. So this is crash test dummy testing. This is destructive. Again, you need another 6 drones. There can't be any physical damage on the parachute testing. You know, by the end of it, you're like taping up arms, and like as long as it, you know, your flight's like 45 seconds, as long as you can get up there to the sky, you're in a pretty good spot. But F3389, you need new drones because if there's any physical damage, if there's little cracks, the transfer of energy isn't the same. And this transfer of energy is assessed similar to how we assess airbags. Is we're flying these drones along a system that flies into a crash test dummy, something called an anthropomorphic testing device, ATD. And then that gives you certain injuries, whether it's your NIJ, which is like your neck injury scale, your neck going back, or your HIC, your head injury criteria, which is kind of like coming right into your forehead. These tests basically then say this drone at this speed, at this angle creates these types of injuries. You then take those injuries and you compare it to what they call a rigid object. It could be a block of wood, piece of metal, but basically what the FAA has determined as like a baseline. And if you're less than this rigid object, you're good for either Cat 3 or Cat 2. And the thing that's interesting in the US, the Europeans have just caught on to this last year. In Canada, we don't talk about it as much, but you now have to include not just your baseline descent rate, you also have to include, so your vertical axis, you have to include your horizontal speed from crosswind. So what you're going to see is probably a lot of confusion at the start of like which drone is going to qualify under which wind conditions. So you've got weight, wind conditions, and then that way you do F3389. So that's step 2. Step 3, you have to register with us. So we have a notification process if there's a drone's faulty or a firmware update or something like that to keep you compliant. And those are kind of the key components with the US. So the US is far more rigorous. And today in the industry, it's interesting. In 2019, we needed kind of an open game of like, hey, everyone's learning. We're growing in this industry together. We're figuring it out. And the Canadian market was really open. And the regulators were like, this is the test ground. Come to Canada and then go grow from here and go elsewhere. That was their kind of mantra. And it is still their mantra today with like their BVLOS rules coming in and these larger drone rules coming. Now the US is more like, no. We have very strict rules. Do this testing. And I think the Canadian government is starting to see the need for that to avoid the bad actors, to avoid the guys who are cutting corners or the ladies cutting corners. But ultimately, the US is far more strict, and the kinetic energy thresholds are probably the most conservative. That one I kind of struggle with because I think we're all human and like all our skulls are kind of the same thickness, and like what kills me in Netherlands, in France should kill me in US. But, the powers that be are wiser than me, and, we'll just go with the flow on that one.
So, wow, this was an amazing explanation, by the way. Thank you for that, because I think a lot of people are confused about this. But it all starts with the means of compliance approval, the MOC, which is what you guys lately received, and that has been covered by Hi and I in our news segment. So that MOC, to simplify it, basically gives you the ability to test drones in order to provide enough data so that someone, the manufacturer, or maybe even I could do.
So we would be making, what the thing with our MOC is we'll be doing the MOCs and DOCs. So because we work with drone manufacturers.
Oh, and the DOC. And the DOC.
So you'll be going on the FAA website, you'll see the MOC, that's AVSS. And then because we build the parachute system, because we are the applicant, which can be the manufacturer or the modifier, we will then make that declaration, which is similar to like if you went and bought a drone tag remote ID. Once the DOC's up there, you registered, you can go do your thing, right? It'll be the same kind of process there.
So potentially you could have, now that you have this MOC, you could take a drone like the Mavic, the Matrice 3 that you had right here that you were showing us, and you can turn that into the FAA and say, we want a DOC for this thing. And then now people would be able to fly it. It would be categorized as either category 2 or category 3, depending on what you found during your testing. And now it ends up on the list of DOC, and that's a drone that can be flown over people,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, so we'll be the ones making those DOCs. And so we have over 50 DJI resellers worldwide. In the US, we have some that will be working with us, being able to, so you could just go to your DJI dealer, authorized reseller of AVSS product, buy the drone, buy the parachute, or if you have the drone already, retrofit it, and then you can go. You just register through the FAA portal. And right now we're working with the FAA on those, like some of the nuanced details about like serial numbers and such.
Wow. So the difference in drone regulations in different countries, the US, Canada, let's say the European region, do you see that as a challenge, or do you view that as whoever is the best in understanding these regulations and working with them, it actually turns into a competitive advantage?
Yeah, like we're regulatory people. Like if I would have followed my path after university, I would have finished law school and been a lawyer. And you need to read. Like now, the thing is with parachute companies is I don't need to read like the 600 pages per country. I need to dial down to a smaller amount per country. But what we do and what we focus on is how do we build a product that captures the most countries as possible? And so you need to go and like map out all these countries, all these rules, all the energies, all the testing, all the compliance. But one thing that it's really good is the ASTM standard has become a gold standard example. So for example, in Canada, the US, and Europe, you can use the ASTM F3322 to show a means of compliance, and they accept that. Same within Australia, same within New Zealand. And this comes from, minus the US, comes from JARIS SORA, so the Joint Authority Rulemaking, the international groups. And that's what the European rules are really kind of based off. Each country might like throw a little cherry on top, their own flavor. In Canada, we do it. Australia does it. But basically, in Europe, we're called an M2 mitigation. And, that we're a way to either get 1 or -2 points on your ground risk score, your GRC. So basically, with a parachute company, if they don't understand the regulations in the countries that they're serving, they're potentially selling an incorrect product. And we see this with, again, let's go back to my one example that I think of false declarations that I think that does a disservice to the parachute company and the clients and users. And in Canada, we have like 200 pilots that bought these fly-fire parachutes for Mavics because they were cheap and they don't have their declarations. They're public safety people can't fly. So I'm very passionate about this topic and feel comfortable stating it, is like they don't have a flight termination system. So what does that mean? The props will spin. And what does that mean? That's a laceration. Imagine the parachute coming down over a crowd of people, blades are spinning. Their argument could be you could use the CSC maneuver. No, my drone failed. Like, how is that going to even work? And now there's a human factor side of it. Now I've got to sit there and like bring my sticks down and like hope it works. And this is where, if you understand the regulations in different countries and the nuances, and you're designing your product, you should be good. There is also the problem in our industry, and again, this Canadian example of people getting caught falsifying declarations, is that someone will just say, "Oh, I'm compliant with this standard," and we've had competitors refuse to give out the report until you bought their product, and I'm like, no. You want a report? Send us an email. We'll send it to you. It's just, for us, it's a view of it. Like, some people are like, well, it's proprietary. It's like, no, it's not. It's like a transcript. Did you pass university? Did you not? Like, let's get rid of this detail that,
Black or white.
yeah, and it's one that, like, it's not like I have to give you my auto trigger algorithms. I don't have to give you every single nuance. It's just like, this is the descent rate. This is how many tests I took. These are the dates. This is my test site. Everything else is just like, and so I think, going back to your question, the parachute companies that really add value are the ones that know how their product needs to be sized and assessed. And like, you'll see right now on the M300, there's different kinetic energies, and like, some of them are coming in at like 100 joules. They'll never get the FAA over people, because that's not how the transfer of energy. And like, again, we've done this testing, we know, and we knew this early on because we did baseline testing on M200, on different. We've done on the M3E, we've done on the M30. We know where they fit and how to size and how the transfers work. And this is where I think a parachute company has an advantage, but it's almost like a must. Like, you don't go to your financial advisor without them knowing some like accounting principles. So there's like those simple things that we think is like, it shouldn't be an advantage. It should just be like, because the manufacturers don't know. And that's okay, because if they choose the right parachute vendor, you should be consulting and helping them, because if they're not compliant, they're not going to sell drones.
So if you factor in that the drone regulations per country or region are different, and you factor in that the drone industry in different regions of the world has a different level of maturity with different use cases and different drone models being used, like, if you factor all that in, like, where do you see for your company the biggest opportunities right now?
North America and Europe. America's got some good parachute rules. Like, Chile had rules before. Brazil's got rules. But some of them are like I've heard stories in like Chile that you need a parachute, but it doesn't need to be plugged in. So what do? They buy the cheapest system, they put the parachute on, and they don't power it because they don't trust. So they know not to trust the crappy systems, low cost, hobby level systems, because the rules don't say they need to actually work. They just buy it anyways. And like, I kind of respect the hustle there. Like, you gotta be like, these guys are clever. They're figuring out something. But if you're talking about like, in enterprise customers, public safety customers, government customers, engineering firms, drone delivery companies, they're not going to take that route. It's more of like that, one guy in a Phantom just trying to make a couple bucks on the weekend, who just like is looking for the cheapest solution, doesn't want to spend any money because he's just pulling all profits out of his business. We don't like those customers. We want customers that are investing, and we're in this for the long haul. It's not about making money today. It is for sustainability, but you're going to make your money by the long game, and being patient, and not having the scars on you that you cut corners. And I think we've seen that. What we find is drone manufacturers, as they grow, like, everyone's a startup. Everyone's going to start somewhere. Not everyone's got deep pockets, rich uncles. So you have to grow. But if you're growing, we find that a lot of drone manufacturers get to a point where they were using kind of cheap solutions. And then they come to us being like, okay, we've had some experience, but we're now starting to scale. Let's do it the right way. And I think that's the same as like enterprise teams or the large drone service providers.
Yeah, something to be said about building for the long run. So that's for sure. I want to ask a question about the U.S. market. We've had OOP, operations over people, rules since 2021. As of today, I think there's only one Category 3 drone that's been approved. 0 Category 2. Category 1 is a self-approval, but even then, we don't have a whole lot of them that actually meet the requirement because you need to add the prop guards on it. Why do you think manufacturers have been so reluctant to create a categorized drone in the US? Because I think at one point it's R&D for the manufacturers so they can figure out how to make this work, maybe by having their own parachute or other measures. But why do you think that it's taken so long until you guys came on board, really, to make it happen?
Because there was no MOC. And like, we submitted our MOC September 2021. And I've been out there, banging on the walls, telling people like, hey, this is coming. We saw it in Canada. We have good curves and data showing like M300 gets announced, parachutes start becoming available and the percentage of parachute to drone increases month over month after about 6 to 9 months. But those are the Canadian rules. In the US, the manufacturers didn't make sense. There was no clear path. They didn't want to go and say to their customers, get a waiver, get a waiver, get a waiver. Because when when someone approaches us to get a waiver, we just give them the documentation first because we know the FAA could take time. We know that people could get denied. And I think drone manufacturers didn't receive that demand from their end users. And that what we found with drone manufacturers is, like right now, working with like Skydio, indirectly, we have a relationship with DJI, but we don't sell the DJI, but, a relationship there. They're the ones that have regulatory teams. And what we found with drone manufacturers is once they reach a certain size, there's a regulatory person who's speaking directly with executives, and they're the ones that are saying, hey, this is coming, or this is the rule, let's go for this market. And so I think there is a piece there with drone manufacturers, as well as parachute testing is expensive. Integration is expensive. It's destructive, takes time. And is that market where they want to fit? And are they losing deals? We're now at the point in Canada where there's RFPs that clearly say it needs to be for ops over people. And I think you'll see that in the US, you'll have DFR programs that put out tenders and they're going to want category 2 or category 3 compliance. But there's just a lack of market demand from end users because there's nothing available, and manufacturers view that. They didn't see it. That's our whole business is explaining to manufacturers, and there's some manufacturers that have been beating the same drum since 2019, 2020, and they're like, oh, it finally makes sense. And it's yeah, and I think as a manufacturer, as any business owner, you can't do everything. You can't spend money on everything. You have to, pick your lane, pick an option, and then go that way. Now, drone delivery companies, I think 54% for type cert companies have a parachute because there's some ways to get to market faster through the DNR process. But a lot of people don't know about that piece because, again, it's that MOC on page 82 that you got to find that if you're not looking, you won't know. And so I think manufacturers have been reluctant because they didn't see it. I think a lot of DFR drone manufacturers now default go, wait, I need a parachute. It's just part of my program, because for the DFR, if they're running under COAs, they don't need a parachute per se, but the chief doesn't want to be in the front page press with the drone going through someone's windshield. Yeah. And then I think when you have DFR programs that are flying Part 107 pilots, they're going to want that. So I think it's just the industry, people kind of knowing it's a thing, but not seeing that clear path on why.
So do you think that's who the customer is going to be, the DFR and the drone delivery? Or do you think the average Joe that has a Part 107 that wants to do some operation over people is going to be also a customer for this?
Yeah, so what we see is from our end users today, we sell primarily to dealers. When we talk to dealers, sometimes they're giving us the stories on who's using it. What we're finding is it's engineering firms, it's drone service providers that are working at oil and gas sites. They're working on critical infrastructure. They're doing things where they know that there could be a chance. And then there's going to be customers, drone delivery, DFR, engineering firms, drone service providers, telecom, construction. Those are the main ones we see. And the DSPs, it's I think with the DSPs, they do the math. Okay, I want to fly this location. It's going to cost me, $2,000 to hire a security team to map out the area and block it down. But if I buy this parachute, I can ROI it in 1 or 2 missions. Okay, let's just buy the parachute. And then drone in the box guys will buy it too, if they're in locations like construction site monitoring, coastal monitoring or something. But I think the DSPs that are buying this are saying, okay, what is my alternative? Do I really want to get up at 5 a.m. every Sunday and go fly this damn mission when there's nobody there? Do I want to have to hire that security team, or do I just not want to bid on the contract? And I think that's where the parachutes come into play on. You should see a clear path to ROI. To me, it's an investment to make your life easier, and you should see a clear path. That would be my feedback.
Yep.
I think what we've seen over the last years is that when smaller companies that were perhaps more agile, more innovative, they would come up with solutions. And then at some point you see DJI being like, oh, that's a great idea. Actually, we'll just develop that in-house and we'll make our own. How concerned are you that one of the drone makers, specifically DJI, is going to be like, you know what, we're just going to make our own parachute system and include it in the enterprise series?
Yeah, they do that with a flying cart. That's always the risk. We believe that the drone industry is more like the automotive industry. you don't make your own airbags, you don't make your own tires, and drone manufacturers are integrators. They all are using T-motor, Vertic motors. They're using Tattoo batteries, Grapple batteries, maybe Max amps. You're seeing RG Pilot PX4. You're seeing Gremsy gimbals. So the drone industry is run by component manufacturers supplying these manufacturers, and they're white labeling them. DJI can do anything, right? I think there's also a piece of DJI could take on the liability. We take on liability from this, as well as, does this scale to the extent that DJI needs it to in one product for 100 countries? No, it's not the case, right? So I think there's a nuance element here that's probably a pain in the butt for them to comply with, where I've got a full team just dedicated on one problem and different markets. So going back to DJI can do what they want. I'm not naive enough to say that they wouldn't. So far, the market dynamics are so much that it doesn't make sense. It's different on radio modules, 915 versus 868 for Europe versus North America. That's a simple one to comply with in different markets. But ultimately, everyone but DJI, it doesn't make sense to invest the money to go through the MOC, the compliance, the building the core products, the tuning, building the algorithms. DJI could probably make a case for it, but the question then becomes, are they really going to want to take on that effort in supply chain? Because parachutes aren't fun. They're a pain in the ass to build and figure out. And it's one of those ones where we can amortize our investments over thousands of drones, and it makes sense to us. While we're servicing multiple, again, we sell to Skydio, we sell to AV, we sell to DJI end users and dealers. I think it's just a little bit different. But again, at the end of the day, DJI will just do what they want, ultimately.
Sounds like you picked the perfect market to be in, right? I mean, parachutes aren't fun. Drone regulations aren't fun either.
Yeah. We have a saying at the office: it sucks to suck. S2S. Sucks to suck. Deal with it. Move on.
There you go. And if it's going to suck, you might as well be really good at it, I guess, and make it turn it into an advantage. I was wondering, since you're quite the drone regulations expert, which country or which region do you think has the most advanced and user-friendly drone regulations, and what could we do specifically here in the US? What could we do better to make the US market more friendly for drone manufacturers, parachute companies, drone pilots, etc.?
I got to think Canada. I've got a bias, but the Canadian rules, we've got so in Canada we have an RPAS task force. We don't call them drones; we call them remotely piloted aircraft systems, right? And we have an RPAS task force. They're nimble. They're a dedicated team. They don't get bogged down in all the bureaucratic stuff, so they can make quick decisions. Extremely responsive, very engaged. They're out there at the international meetings, the committees, and they do see that Canada as a leapfrog. So it creates an environment where they know that there's a tolerance for screw-ups. There's a tolerance for mistakes, but it's all about being forthright and figuring things out. And I think the Canadian government looks at it as, we have so much empty space. We got we're 40 million people in the second largest landmass. So we kind of have this unique advantage where we got a lot of empty space. So there's a lot more tolerances, as well as we have such a large landmass that we don't have the ground infrastructures for our remote First Nation communities in Northern Canada. So we see it as almost we have to have it. Similar to when you look at Africa, Rwanda, they're building drones and allowing them to go because they don't have the roads, and the roads are far more expensive than people are dying. And I think from a Western country perspective, that's where it works. If you're a drone manufacturer and you want the easiest path, there's countries without rules, and it's a free for all. But then you get this weird taint on you built your company in this other country, which I don't necessarily agree with. But if you're looking for a country with rules that are respected, I think Canada is your greatest market. Now, you're not going to get rich selling in Canada. You're not going to make all your millions, but you're going to figure out your processes. You're going to figure out how to deal with minus 30 weather. You're going to figure out how to deal with minus 21 day next week plus 20. You're going to deal with these environments, coastal regions, large land masses, the Rocky Mountains. So we have all these elements. It's just the one variable that you're not going to ever get to the full capabilities, the dollars.
Yeah. Do you see drone regulations between these different countries converging? Is there any sharing of best practices, and is it becoming more universal, or are countries just going in different directions?
Yeah, no, the JAR is SORA. So it's the Joint Authority Rulemaking Unmanned Systems. Joint authority rulemaking. I forget what the U.S. is, but JARA SORA, specific operational risk assessment. There's like 100 countries involved. I think that is just like the specific open category, certified category. Those rules are becoming commonplace. Like you've got that in Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. You're starting to, I don't know, the Japanese have their own system. I think the Chinese have their own JARA SORA kind of approach, or to the SORA, sorry. And I think that is where we're seeing the growth, and it's just becoming a best practice. So I think there is that consistency coming and predictability coming. The thing is with drone regulations, which people don't like, but is actually in the manufacturer's advantage, is usually have a 1 or 2 year heads up. Like when the rules are coming, they don't say, oh, new rules tomorrow. Like, no. They go to the industry, they get feedback, you go read. And like when the ops over people rule came, they introduced category 4 randomly that people didn't expect. And they applauded them because they listened to the feedback. But they still stayed true to a lot of the same. Same with remote ID, right? There was always going to be like, there's the fear network versus broadcasting, but they did still stick with that remote ID. So as a manufacturer, I can like make an educated guess without a full out, I'm not playing blackjack, right? There's like a trend in like, okay, I need 2 more cherries on top. I didn't know that. I thought I was going to need 1. So there's a little bit, so you can't concrete finish that product the day the rules come because you needed to see the final rule. And you're not supposed to see it before, right? And so this is where I think drone manufacturers, our lives are going to start becoming easier. But again, you got to go do the groundwork. You got to go spend your time reading.
Yeah. By the way, I want to say that in the US, people are fighting over whether we should call a UAS an unmanned aircraft or an uncrewed aircraft. The rest of the world has it figured out with RPAS. Remotely piloted aircraft system makes 100% sense to me, and that's what the US needs to move over. Actually, we have internal documents that we've changed recently to change everything UAS to RPAS, and it just makes a lot more sense. So
imagine if we just all called it a drone, though. Imagine if we just said drone. Imagine if we just simplified it and said, yes, we know these drones were used in 2010 to do bad things, and we don't like that word. But you know what? It actually is the easiest one because we get rid of all the, is it unmanned? We get rid of, like, I have heard arguments that RPAS is a bad name because what happens when it's not remotely piloted and it's all autonomous and all that.
Well, then it's a different aircraft. It's an autonomous, then it's fine. But remotely piloted makes a lot more sense to me than unmanned or uncrewed. I hate the term uncrewed because there's a crew. It's just not sitting right there in the aircraft.
It's not. It's uncrewed,
in the aircraft, right? So yeah. Anyways,
I'm with Josh. I think we should call them drones.
Yeah, drones works. Drones work.
Totally.
Most people that fly fixed wing don't like to call them drones because drones are usually multi-rotors. But yeah, I agree with that. I do have a question, and I don't want to let you go before you answer that question, and I'm sure you can't. But which models can we expect to become approved with a categorized label here in the U.S. Category 2, Category 3? Can you share any sizzle here?
Yeah, I can. I'll say that you will see the M350-300 because it's the same aircraft. And you know what's funny is we were fortunate when we did our third-party testing. We actually did it at 9.2 kg, which is the max of the 350. We didn't know this at the time. We just it ended up being that way. The M30, the M3E, and then the M3D, so that you'll have the full DJI, as well as you'll see the Skydio X10. That'll be coming as well later on. And so over the next 6 months, I think if you're a drone pilot and you're starting to plan, you're not going to be able to fly over people tomorrow. But by fall, you'll have a full suite of options for different types of missions, whether it's thermal, whether it's the M30, M300, etc., Category 2, Category 3, and you'll be able to go. And so those declarations are coming. We've done already all the baseline testing. So the way we work is we actually do the ATD crash test dummy testing before we size the parachute. So we know how to optimize the size. We don't want you carrying extra weight if you don't have to. And we want to make sure the wind conditions are good. And so we do that first, then we go through parachute testing. So over the next 3 months, we have a very straightforward schedule on our team on these DJI drones, these Skydio drones, and some other ones need to get out. And then, so by the fall, hopefully at Commercial UAV, and you know what? Hold me to it. If you guys are going to be there in September
we'll be
with
there.
drones, and then they'll be there. And so right now we're at AVSS. We've got the M30, the M3E, the M30, the M3D, and the M300 on display, and we'll be showing more. And So you'll have the full DJI suite for your pilots, as well as you'll have some American-made drones and some options there. And there'll be a couple more coming. I'm not going to say now, but you'll see it throughout the summer.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So fast forward a couple of years. Let's say we're in 2030 now. Like, where would you want to be with AVSS, and what kind of changes would you like to see in the drone regulations internationally, so that we can actually move this whole drone industry forward in a significant way?
Predictability is what we want to see from regulators. We want to see consistency and predictability, and we want to see them saying, these are the rules, these are the consequences for not following the rules, and these are the fines for not following the rules. I think that's one thing as a business owner is, if I'm going to play by the rules, if I'm going to buy a parachute to fly my drone, or if I'm going to build a parachute, and you tell me that a false declaration in Canada is a $15,000 fine, I expect you to do it. I don't want to hear the bull crap. Speeding is a ticket. False declarations is a ticket. So that to me is a regulatory piece that by 2025, I want to see that the regulators actually like I don't know why they're and I think the US has actually done a good job of, like, you see the Philly guy flying over people like an idiot. And I think that's where you need to see the regulators say, these are the rules, follow them, because you're hurting the good guys or the good gals that are following the rules and making those investments. It's not a fair market in that way. And then for us, AVSS, be ubiquitous. We want to be, similar to that point of your Grepo battery, your T-motor, your Vertic motor. You want us, we'll be that default, and then we'll have some other products. Again, we work on different things. We kind of classify our products as autonomous landing systems, whether that's, we drop stuff out of airplanes, stuff off drones. We're working on CubeSat parachutes. So, like, again, we're just going higher up in bigger sizes, starting to play in larger aircraft again, like 150 kg, maybe air taxis, maybe. We'll see. But ultimately, we're about making sure products are regulatory compliant is the niche that we really are strong in.
Wow. Very cool. We do have one last question that we always ask during this show for our guest, which is, what is your favorite drone to fly and not crash?
No, the Plummet. You don't even know what the Plummet is.
No, I don't think I know what that is.
AVSS, we build
what is
we build our own drones. We are not a drone manufacturer, but we build drones. We call them Plummets. They're test aircrafts. They do not break. Oh. They fall out of the sky and do not break. And so our favorite aircraft are the Plummets, where I've got drones from 2018 that are same. When we build a new parachute, the first thing we do is test them on the Plummet versions. So we make mock-up drones. We've got kind of a mock-up M300. We're the first M300 knockoff that no one ever saw. And we build these aircrafts that are built out of sometimes metal frames. They've got a lot of foam. We build them to last. And that's my favorite aircraft, because I can break them and they cost maybe a propeller versus, all these other drones that are fragile.
Oh boy, I'm glad I asked that question. That was awesome. Very insightful. Well, Josh, thank you so much. Where can people find more information about the parachutes and about the company in general?
Yeah, so avss.co, Charlie Oscar. You can find us there. As well as LinkedIn, we've got a pretty good presence. Facebook, we don't have Twitter. But LinkedIn and our website are the two big ones. Also, you can see content. If you're looking for us for crashing and deploying parachutes, doing testing, our YouTube channel, AVSS Drone Parachute, if you just put that into the search on YouTube. Billy Kyle's got good videos, content of us. That's a good place to go check it out as well. He's had some behind-the-scene looks several times now. He's got to deploy parachutes. So those are the best places to go check us out.
That's awesome. Josh, thank you for your time. And this will be posted very soon, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you.